Good morning, everybody. Thank you everybody for coming today. We are going to be talking about Title IX, violence prevention and education, as far as being a staff member is concerned. We also have May Palacios from the Blackburn Center Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. She is going to be discussing on helping victims of sexual violence, how we can do it effectively and compassionately as staff members at Douglas Education Center. I'm going to start off the presentation. I'm going to be talking a little bit about Title IX and VAWA, which is the Violence Against Women Act, and how it pertains to Douglas Education Center. And then I'm going to turn it over to May for the rest of the presentation. So Title IX is nothing new. It's actually a very old regulation. It was signed into law back in 1972. And it started out really to prevent sex discrimination in education programs that receive federal funding. It actually started out primarily for school athletics to make sure that there wasn't any gender disparity or sex discrimination in athletics. But since then, it has grown and expanded into other facets of higher education as well. So what Title IX does is it bans any sort of sex discrimination in any institution that receives federal funding. Sex discrimination has been expanded to include sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking. The Title IX coordinator, which is myself, along with an appointed committee that we have here at Douglas Education Center, work to ensure that all students and staff here are free from all types of sexual harassment. So what is VAWA? VAWA is the Violence Against Women Act. It was originally implemented back in 1994. The act provides $1.6 billion towards the investigation and prosecution of violent crimes against women. It imposes automatic and mandatory restitution on those convicted, and it allows civil redress in cases prosecutors choose to leave unprosecuted. The Act also established the Office on Violence Against Women within the Department of Justice. The components of VAWA have been strengthened over time. The latest version extends rights to LGBT individuals, Native Americans, and undocumented immigrants, and was recently reauthorized by President Obama in 2013. Part of the reauthorization that Obama signed includes what's called the Campus Save Act. And it's a provision that imposes new obligations for colleges and universities in regards to sexual violence, dating violence, domestic violence, and stalking. And it acts as a complement to the regulations that already were around due to Title IX. So this new law is designed to help institutions better protect students and employees from sexual violence. So the way that VAWA and Douglas Education Center work, Douglas Education Center is required by federal law to meet certain requirements when it comes to maintaining a secure and work and academic environment that's free from any form of sexual harassment. Part of that includes the training that we're doing today. There's student training, staff training, and other training throughout the year that Douglas Education Center is required to do so that we can ensure that our campus is free from any sort of sexual discrimination. The regulations are pretty clear. Any violation of the Violence Against Women Act constitutes grounds for immediate disciplinary action up to and including dismissal from the institution. So anytime that a student or a staff member reports any type of sexual misconduct, the university is required to thoroughly investigate it and take the proper action. The reason why this is so important is all you need to do is look at the statistics. 1 in 5 women in college will face sexual assault. 1 in 33 men will face sexual assault. Freshmen, particularly freshman women, are the most vulnerable for sexual assault. So when first-year students come into Douglas Education Center, at orientation we have a whole presentation that we just implemented with the fall 2015 semester. And the goal is to get them before they even start classes, because they are the most vulnerable for any type of sexual harassment or sexual discrimination. So we want to make sure that the students have the knowledge that they need and know that there's some place that they can turn to should they ever need help. There's some more statistics here. Women 18 to 24 who are enrolled in college are 3 times more likely than women in general to suffer from sexual violence. Male-aged college students are 78% more likely than non-students to be a victim of rape or sexual assault. Only 20% of female student survivors actually report sexual harassment or sexual violence to law enforcement, and that's a statistic that we all need to pay attention to. That's basically telling you right there that it happens a lot more than what gets reported. And it's a big reason why we're here today, because if somebody comes and confides to you, we need to be able to give you the resources that you need so that you can help them, and in turn, myself as the Title IX coordinator and others who are on the sexual harassment committee can help them as well. Victim reporting is very crucial, and Douglas Education Center encourages any victim of sexual assault, dating violence, domestic violence, stalking, and bullying to report the incident in a timely manner. All staff members are required to report sexual misconduct. So if a student comes to you and they confide in you and they say, you know, this happened to me, you know, I don't want you to tell anybody, but this happened to me, we're required to investigate it by law. It doesn't have to go any further than certain individuals at the institution, but we need to make sure that we take care of the problem so it doesn't happen to them again, or it doesn't happen to any other student as well. So these things are not very easy to talk about, and I know sometimes it's an uncomfortable situation. Sometimes you don't know quite what to say to the person, and that's really what this training is all about. And May is going to have more examples than I will, but just a couple things. You know, if a student comes and shares with you information about sexual misconduct, you can first of all thank this student for sharing the information with you, and let them know that you're here to listen. But let them also know that you're obligated to share this information with the appropriate college official. And if a student is worried that their information won't be confidential, assure them that it's only going to be shared with the DEC personnel that absolutely need to know. So the next question is, who should you report to? If a student comes to you and says, you know, this happened to me, what's the next step? You can report directly to me, so you can come to my office and say, hey, this student told me about an incident, and I want to let you know so that something can be done about it. You can come to me, you can come to any member of the sexual harassment committee, and their names are up there. Tony from admissions, Susan in education, and Deborah in the business office. So what happens next? Just to give you a brief overview of what happens once a report is made. The investigative committee, which is made up of myself and the members of the sexual harassment committee, we will launch a thorough investigation into the allegations, and we will reach a conclusion within a reasonable time period, which is approximately 14 business days. So far this year, we've had two Title IX violations, 2 students that have come and reported a Title IX violation for various reasons. We currently are able to resolve the matter within 7 business days, which I think is the best case scenario. We want to make sure that we do our job and investigate it, but we also want to make sure that the situation gets resolved so everybody can, you know, move on with their lives and feel good about the situation that they're in. When we're launching an investigation, a student has a right to request a change in their academic or their living situations as long as they are reasonably available. And that does not have to happen before the investigative committee actually reaches any conclusion or even questions any witnesses at that point. So we try to accommodate the student as best as possible. If there's something that we can do, if we can change them from one class to another, if we can move them from one residence to another, we will do that as long as it is reasonable. Some of the sanctions that the committee does, they range, and it really goes on the severity of the incident that's reported. Most commonly, if the incident is not too severe, what we'll do is we'll have some sort of additional interpersonal violence education and training. All of you know that we have our online interpersonal prevention program, not anymore. In addition to that, we have a couple other things that we're working on, and we will go ahead and have a student complete various things and usually write a one-page paper on what they learned and how they can stop that, having that behavior in the future if the offense is not too severe. Again, we will make changes in their academic and living situation. Another big thing that we'll do is an order of no contact for both the accuser and the accused while they're on Douglas Education Center property. And that's really the only thing that we can enforce here is what happens on Douglas Education Center property. And getting back to what I was saying before, if a student is afraid that their information won't be kept confidential, one of the things that you can help them understand is that Douglas Education Center only has authority for what happens on DEC property. So if they come and confide something to you, we're not going to go to the police unless they want assistance in reporting to the police. Otherwise, we have no jurisdiction there. The only thing that we can help them do is prevent that behavior from happening again on DEC property. So they don't have to go to the police if they don't want to. It'll be kept in-house, but they have the option to do both if they want. In the most extreme cases, it hasn't happened yet, thankfully. In the most extreme cases, we will look to expel somebody from Douglas Education Center if the grievance is that severe. A violation of any of the sanctions that we impose once we reach our conclusion in the case, anybody that violates any of the sanctions that we impose can be immediately dismissed from the institution. That's not to say that they will be, but if it's severe enough, they can be. Retaliation. Retaliation is specifically mentioned in the regulations, and we take retaliation very, very seriously. If there's any retaliation, if a student reports something to you about another student, and we go through the investigative process, and that student that was accused does anything in retaliation against the other student or any staff member, or vice versa, if the accuser doesn't like the stance that the school takes or the conclusion that the school takes, and they try to retaliate, we will investigate that thoroughly, and if the offense is severe enough, it can be grounds for removal from the institution. So once we reach our conclusion, any retaliation is expressly prohibited, and we will thoroughly investigate any retaliation that happens. So just remember that all employees of Douglas Education Center are required to report any information about sexual misconduct. Failure to do so can result in legal sanctions against the school or the employee. So it's very, very important that if somebody does report something to you, that you come to myself, the Title IX coordinator, or the Sexual Harassment Committee, so that we can investigate it and make sure that this behavior is not repeated and doesn't happen again. If you are interested in any additional resources, if you ever have any questions on anything that I spoke about today, please stop in and see me. May from the Blackburn Center Against Domestic and Sexual Violence is an excellent resource. They have tons of resources there. Their phone number and their website. There's a wealth of knowledge there. Also, RAIN, which is the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, is also an excellent resource for helping students, statistics about victims, anything that you would want to know. These are excellent resources. Well, if it was an instructor, that's a good question. If it was an instructor that's being accused, and we would have to take it on a case-by-case basis. If it's possible that a student can be moved into another class, then yes, absolutely, we would do that, because the first goal in it, and we're not assuming guilt or we're not assuming fault by anybody until we conclude the investigation. But the first priority is to make sure that whoever comes in and reports this, that they are not put into a situation where they feel uncomfortable for any reason. So we will try and make all the reasonable and necessary accommodations possible. But we don't assume that the person that is being accused is guilty. And obviously that's going to be a difficult situation. So the first thing that we would do is we would talk to the student and see, you know, what would they be comfortable with, and then if we can accommodate them, we will. I mean, there's only so much that you can do, and we're of course going to be taking everything on a case-by-case basis. But if it's possible, if the student doesn't want to be in that classroom anymore, they're going to have to recognize that, you know, they're probably going to see that person that they accused again. I mean, you're right. It's a small building, it's a small campus, but we will do our best to make sure that they are as comfortable as possible, and we will make any accommodation as reasonably possible for them. But yeah, are they not going to see that person again? No, they probably will. But the thing about it, the thing that we want to do is make sure that we communicate with them and find out what they would feel comfortable with the things that they need, and if we can accommodate them from an academic standpoint, then we absolutely will. I don't think that there's not going to be a perfect solution in every single case, and it's impossible to do that, because in some ways there may not be another class for the student to go to, but all we can do is try our best and try to make sure that we do our best for the student and get them to a point where they feel comfortable continuing in school. But each case is different, and we really have to approach it that way. And thankfully, that hasn't happened yet. We haven't had, since the new regulations have taken effect, we haven't had a student accuse a teacher yet. We've had a student accuse another student, and in that case, the student felt comfortable being around that student in the classroom, but wanted us to make sure that, you know, that there was no contact in any other setting while on campus. So that's an example of something that we've done. But really, we have to take it as we come and do the best that we can to make the student feel comfortable. Any other questions? Okay. I will turn it over to May then from the Blackburn Center Against Domestic and Sexual Violence.
If this feels triggering for you, in all sincerity and honesty, I'd encourage that you call our hotline. Any calls that come into our hotline are non-judgmental, it's safe, you can be anonymous, and everything you share with Blackburn Center is completely confidential. We cannot tell law enforcement, we cannot tell people here, we can't tell anybody anything short of 3 things. And those 3 things are child abuse, regardless of, you know, how old you are, what child abuse we have to report. You're going to hurt yourself or someone else beyond that. Totally confidential. When we say confidential, we mean it. That's been a hard and fought battle for many years in this movement, so we mean it. We provide services to men, women, and children. We provide services regardless of gender identity or sexual orientation. The majority of victims are women. The majority of perpetrators are men, but that doesn't mean that men can't be victims and women can't be perpetrators. And kind of the last rule is talk to me, ask questions, interrupt me. I mean, you don't have to be like, I totally disagree. Like, you can if you want, I'm cool with that, but it's probably not gonna be like super successful for any of us. I'll just get back in the car and be like, they totally disagreed. So let's get rolling. And what my job is at Blackburn Center is I train professionals on how to respond to victims of domestic and sexual violence. It's my job. I provide services to victims, I provide direct service, but the majority of my time is spent working with professionals, especially in higher ed, on how do you give a victim-centered and informed response when you're faced with a disclosure. So I'm not here to dictate the law or policy. Michael's already told you this is the policy based on the law. What I'm here to do is give you the skills to make it victim-centered and help keep people safe and not cause them additional trauma. Fair enough? Right? So the very first thing I want to do, because I think it's worth 2 minutes of time, and it puts us all on the same page, is give you a really fast video. And it's 2 minutes. It's called Consent Tea, as in tea, like you drink. And my purpose in doing this video is this kind of is a really good way of getting everybody on the same page around when we say sexual assault, sexual violence, what do we mean? We mean that it's any activity without the agreement of all involved parties. So this says it much better than me, and it only takes 2 minutes. You want to see it?
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they go, "Oh my God, I would love a cup of tea, thank you." Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you could make them a cup of tea, or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say no thank you, then don't make them tea. At all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, "Yes, please. That's kind of you." And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, "Do you want tea?" because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea. And they said yes. But in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down. Make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it going, "But you wanted tea last week." Or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, "But you wanted tea last night." If you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you're able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand it when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea.
Pretty clear, right? They're showing this to students all over higher ed. It's funny, right? Kind of lighthearted. We all get the point, so we're all on a good same page. I don't know who made this. It's on YouTube. Show it. It's good. It's fast. So everybody in the room, I realized that I probably should have given you slightly more information about Blackburn Center before launching into the consent video. I'm going to drive you crazy. I feel so bad that you have to film me because I'm moving all the time. Sorry. I'll try to be good. When I start to move too far, you should kick me, hit me, tell me to get back. Huh? She'll get me going in the right direction. So at Blackburn Center, everything, we have a ton of services for victims of domestic and sexual violence. Hotline, shelter, advocacy services. The information that I'm going to share with you is really culled, not just from sort of some educational background, but it's because I work with victims and I know what makes them feel safe and maybe not as traumatized. So that's why we do what we do. If ever anybody has a question or a concern, we are thrilled when professionals pick up the phone and call the hotline and ask. We're not going to go, "Shh, they know nothing, click." We're like, "Yay, they called," because they realized that I couldn't sculpt anything. If you told me to sculpt something, I would be like, "I made a chair, look," because that's not what we do. So if I needed to sculpt something, I would reach out and say, How do I do this? So if you're in the position and you're like working with somebody who's been a victim, reach out to us and say, I'm not sure. How do I do this? Does that make sense? Right? Is that okay? Everybody going to be okay with doing that? Right? Because remember, it's confidential and we can't repeat it. So we talk about, Michael did a great job of giving you some statistics and some information. One of the things that often happens for college students and folks in higher ed is they don't talk a lot about what's happened. And oftentimes, what are some barriers? One of the stats Michael had that was really accurate was only 20% report to law enforcement. And we know it's probably around the same with reporting to people, to instructors and things like that. Why not? What are some barriers to reporting?
They're embarrassed.
They're embarrassed, excellent.
They blame themselves.
Why do they blame themselves?
Well, I mean, if you go to a fraternity party and you get drunk, and the guys are drunk, and you have two drunk people having sex, then how do you blame him and not yourself? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think that's an
They're
excellent
afraid.
point. What are they afraid of?
Repercussions from the abuser.
Absolutely.
Retaliation.
Retaliation,
Peer pressure.
peer pressure. What about peer pressure?
Well, I mean, you're in a gang and you tell someone and they might like the person that you're abusing stuff, they're going to see a different part of it and they're just not understanding all the time.
Absolutely. Anything else?
They don't think people will believe them.
They don't think people will believe them. It's a sad truth, but most people don't. Because we'll talk more about that, but that's excellent. What else?
They might not know who to go to or if there's even that option.
Right. What else? Anything else? I think you guys hit most of the high points. Point is, there's a lot of reasons that people, what are some barriers if, oh my gosh, let's do a quick activity. I'm so scattered around some of this stuff sometimes. And this is a good group to do this in. And it helps to talk about why victims sometimes blame themselves, because I think that's really important and a very important topic, especially when we're working with younger folks. But what we're going to do is a really quick experiment. If any of you have seen this done, please don't ruin it for everybody else in the room. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a question of the men in the room. And I'm going to ask the same question of the women in the room. I'm just going to ask it a little bit later. So for the men in the room, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to generate your response. And then I'm going to ask the same question of the women in the room, 5 seconds to generate your response. And be honest in your response. Everybody ready? Men in the room, would you like to hear the question? When I say the question, I'm going to count to 5 in my own little brain, and then I'm going to say go. Just yell out your answer, okay? So, men in the room, what do you do every day to prevent yourselves from being raped? I didn't say go yet. All right, go. What do you do to prevent yourselves from being raped? Tell me.
Don't put myself in that situation.
Don't put yourself in that situation. Okay. What else? Huh?
I keep eating and getting fatter so that
I've never heard that when I proctor this activity, but can I use that in the future? Like some gentleman said once. Anybody else? Some of you kind of are looking at me like, huh? So wait, take it, don't say anything yet. But I'm going to ask the women in the room, right? And I'm going to count to 5 and then just yell out your answer. Women in the room, what do you do every day to prevent yourselves from being raped?
Absolutely nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Dress
So,
appropriate.
dress appropriately. What else? Nobody else? Huh? Think about when you were really young. So I'm going to do this because sometimes this doesn't. My husband. Here's what. The way that our culture kind of works, we put out a lot of information around rape prevention tips, right? We make it sort of like it's this preventable thing. And we tend to do only 2 things with prevention tips. We often never tell men what a prevention tip looks like. And that's kind of bad because 1 in 33 men are sexually assaulted while they're in school. We only tell women, and that means that women internalize this information, and if they are sexually assaulted, they think, I must have done something wrong because I didn't follow this model. So for those of you who are uninitiated, these prevention tips look like this. Never walk alone at night. Always have your cell phone out. If you're walking alone, pretend you're talking on your cell phone, especially at night. Make sure the ringer is off. Carry your keys like a weapon. Don't go anywhere alone. Women in the room, what are we told about beverages?
What's your beverage?
Why?
Someone like that.
And how are we told to carry a beverage?
You just drink it fast so you don't have to carry it.
Drink it fast. I like that. Nobody ever gave me that prevention tip. Just drink fast, and you're told carry it like this all the time. So now I'm not saying like men are bad and women good. Like that's not the point around this. The point is that those tend to be not the things that necessarily those kind of play into the real rape stereotype: creepy stranger jumping out of the bushes, attacking someone, sort of young. 92% of people are assaulted by people they know. Alcohol is the most common date rape drug, but not because people are putting a roofie in it. It's because people are getting people intoxicated so that their ability to consent, of course, drops right off, but it's easier to assault someone that way. So, what also is really bad about the prevention tips is, what does it make all men? Predators. So realize that the folks that are coming in as young people, they've got all this in their head, and this is preventable. So that's another reason that they are not coming forward and talking about it. And the reason we talk about this is what we want to do is make sure that you understand if somebody's disclosing to you, this is a big decision. Statistically speaking, someone's more likely to light their car on fire for the insurance money than they are to lie about sexual assault. Wrap your brain around that. Because we always say they're lying because they had regret sex, or I have to comment on regret sex because I have to say, somebody just looked at me like, what is she gonna say about regret sex? If you regretted a relationship and an interaction, would you want to share that with 10 or 12 people? No. So very few people lie about being assaulted. They don't do it for money or motivation or for power. Some people might, but overwhelmingly they don't. So sometimes I think we get in that habit of thinking like, oh, somebody's lying or not telling the truth. First of all, as a non-investigator to the matter, it's not your worry. So you want to always start by believing that what someone's disclosing to you is truthful, because more than likely it is. Make some sense? So I'm going to give you your skills and some response. Before we move on, are there questions or concerns? Everybody doing okay? This is hard, right? Oh, I should have told you, feel free, move about the cabin. If you need coffee or water, don't sit here and be like, I'm gonna cough and not get water or coffee, okay? So here's what did Michael tell you? He told you if you get a disclosure, what do you have to do? Report, right? And here's what, you're gonna have to report it. You have to report it. So students who are coming to you, they're disclosing, their privacy is very, very, very important to them. So here's what we would sort of suggest you may want to do. You're interacting with somebody, you're getting this disclosure. Very first thing you probably should do you all know when your students have something going on, if they're coming to you, right? You can tell the difference between I missed class because I had a cold versus this thing is happening. So when somebody's coming in and you're getting that feeling in the pit of your stomach something's going on with this person, I would let them know this. I would say, hey, just remember, I'm here for you. But if you tell me about ... just know, like you've heard me say before, I have to report it. And then if they are reporting it, if that information is coming out, I'm encouraging you to interrupt them gently. Not I have the luxury of training a lot of college students who are working with other college students who have an obligation to report. And when I say interrupt, and I have the chance to sort of see them play out the scenarios, they stone cold, do some interrupting. What I'm sort of saying is, let them finish the sentence and then say, like Michael has said, thank you so much for sharing this information with me. I have to report it to Michael, to the people on the, to who are you going to tell and what can they expect? A student may say to you, I don't want to talk to you anymore about it then. Then you have Blackburn Center as an option, right? Hand them the hotline card, they can't report. We're here. We're certainly not going to discourage them from continuing to talk to you, but maybe they just want to know a little bit more. Makes sense? But you want to stop. You want to interrupt. You want to realize that when you're having this communication, privacy is really important because of all the things we talked about, retaliation and blame and fear. So interrupt, let them know what they can expect. And then also let them know you're not going to share this information with anybody else, because you're not, because you shouldn't, right? Because that's a fear, especially if they know. You guys are a pretty small campus, right? Does everybody kind of know each other? Kind of, yeah. That you're gonna, it's just between you guys, right? Because you're not gonna go like tell your class, you're not gonna be like, attention, Susie won't be in class today, because like you wouldn't do that. It's a horrible and very victim blamey thing to do. So let them know it's private, it's between the two of you. Good sense? Okay, the other thing that victims really need is to feel very safe. And one of the questions you can ask is, what would make you feel safe? Can you always do it? No. But we have this tendency, we don't ask victims a lot of questions. We almost get like, because I'm sure that when you guys have to come and you're sitting here and you're present, that you're like, this is never going to happen. This is totally irrelevant to me. I don't have to be here. Because that's how we get, right? That's how we think sometimes around that. But when it's happening and when you're in the moment, your brain, your heart's going to be like, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, because you want to do the right thing for people. So privacy matters, safety. What could I do to make you feel safer? Maybe you can do it, maybe you can't. But it starts a discussion around safety. Maybe you could. Maybe you teach two of the same sections and it's another student who's in that same section. Maybe it's somebody saying, I would like somebody to go with me to the police station if they choose to report it legally. However, maybe could you sit here while I call my mom? Whatever would make them feel safer. If it's within your power to do it, if it's not, say, maybe that's something that when I report this, they could help you with, or Blackburn Center could help you with. Make some sense? So think about their privacy and honor it, and think about their safety. It's very important for victims. There's words I love when you're working with somebody who's been a victim. And remember, this is immediately post-disclosure, right? This is what we're looking at. Somebody's told you this has happened. So I'm going to give you the best words in the whole wide world. They're my favorite words. If I could convince everybody on earth who may encounter a victim, which is just about everybody on earth, sadly, to say these words, I'd be out of job. And these are the best words ever. They're so simple. Everybody ready? You sure? I'm so sorry this happened. This is not your fault. Say them. How about we go like 1, 2, 3, say it. Was that hard? Did it hurt you? Anybody hurting? Right? No. And I work with victims all the time, and this is the one thing, this is the one phrase that people never say. And victims, when they hear it, it relaxes them, because the victims blame themselves for dating violence and sexual assault and for being victims. It shouldn't happen. And it is not up to you to decide the guilt or the innocence of anybody. It is not their fault that they were victims of an assault. Victims are never ever to blame for what's happened to them, but we never say it. You become a part of them, you're in their corner. Even if you think you would have behaved differently, that's not up to you, because you weren't in their situation. So when you say, I'm sorry this happened, this isn't your fault, it's a lot of validation, and you keep that door open. Now you're a partner to them in helping them to be safe. This is different than maybe what a misconduct board can say, right? It's not about that. It's about you being that valuable first responder. You want to think about things that are, remember, this is power, this is control most of the time. So you would think privacy and safety, and this isn't someone's fault. You also want to help give them back some power and letting them make choices around their own situation. We have this tendency when we're good helping people, we're like you need to call the police and go to the hospital and tell Michael, and we want to give like all these steps because we want to be good helpers, right? So not the best call. You want to be able to give options. How would you feel, I'm going to have to tell Michael, how do you feel about that? You have to do it anyway, but having that discussion, asking them, what can I do for you right now? And also with power, I think this is so important, and I would never ever have thought about it until I started to do this work. There's two things people sometimes do with victims, and they're not necessarily great things to do. One thing that people sort of do a lot is they touch victims. Some people are touchy. Some people are natural huggers. I'm not a natural hugger, but some people are. Don't touch a victim of sexual or domestic violence or stalking without their permission. And when I say that, I mean it. I mean, don't squeeze a shoulder, don't tap a knee, don't hug. If they stand there and they're in the I'd like a hug mode, and you feel comfortable hugging, hug. Other than that, no contact. It's very disempowering and can feel really traumatic for people. The other thing that is important is that you get eye level or lower. This is obviously a big challenge for me. I'm a whopping 4'11", but when I work with victims, I'm always eye level or lower. Right? I want to give them back some power. I see a lot of times I'm in hospitals and I watch law enforcement come in and they're doing an interview, and man, they're right over a victim. Because that's what they're trained to do, right? They're authority figures. It's not, we need police officers to do what they do, but you watch that instant feeling of someone's over them. So sometimes you may want to feel like, okay, I'm going to stand up, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Not such a great thing. So giving people back power through your own kind of very subtle ways of behaving is very helpful. I want to mention too, with giving people back some power, if someone's coming to you about a recent sexual assault, don't demand, don't say you have to go to the hospital. Because victims often will hear that you have to go to the hospital, and then they maybe don't feel like there's a lot of choice making in that. But you want to be able to give people options about going to the hospital so that they understand it's a good and safe choice in most circumstances. Systemically, I want to give you guys a couple of high points around this. Is that okay? Around people, victims of sexual violence going to a hospital. Because it matters, because sometimes what we think is not always accurate. The very first thing is, do you guys know if a victim of sexual assault goes to the hospital, tell me, true or false, the hospital has to call the police?
False.
I hear a false. Why do you say false?
Because it's not up to the hospital to determine what actually happened.
Okay.
They're making a conclusion off of, it's not their job to make it.
I hear that. I like that. What about, who said true? Why do you say true?
For their safety.
For their safety. Yeah, that's part of the truth making around it.
Maybe the victims won't do it on their own.
Yeah, there's some element of that.
Because they potentially have a victim of a crime, don't they have a requirement to report that?
So here's where this gets interesting. A sexual assault must be reported to law enforcement if you're at the hospital. They have that obligation. But it's up to a victim whether or not they're going to speak to law enforcement at the hospital, or if ever. So the hospital must, and this matters because if you have a student who's been assaulted within a week, up to 1 week, they'll do a forensic kits. It is up to the victim whether or not they want to talk to the police when they're at the hospital. They have 2 years. They can have a kit collected anonymously, no name on it, and they have up to 2 years to decide whether or not they're going to report it to law enforcement. So just because the police are coming to the hospital, because they're going to come, right? There's evidence that needs to be collected, doesn't mean they have to talk to them, and that kind of matters. Because sometimes you could say to somebody, you can go to the hospital, you can have stuff collected, somebody from Blackburn Center can meet you there, they'll tell you about more options. I don't think you have to talk to the police if you don't want to. Does that make some sense? Good to know? Who knows, right, nobody ever knows this information, because you kind of are like, oh. So my point is that realize that there's always a lot of options that are available for people that can feel really empowering. Because people think, I'm gonna have to go to the hospital, I'm gonna go through this, I'm gonna have to go through that, I'm gonna tell the police. Sometimes not so much, and it's really great if they can go to the hospital under a lot of circumstances to maybe be treated if they need some other medications and kind of all that, all of those things. The other thing I wanted to let you guys know about is when victims are giving you Sometimes when victims recall information to you, first of all, please don't be asking a lot of questions. Don't do detailed business. It's really not up to you. If for some reason, right, because you're not an investigator, if you need more information, do tell me mores instead of whys. Nobody's ever asked a good why question. Think of a why question that doesn't put you on the defensive. Like if I'm like, will you be my example?
Sure.
Thanks. I really put you on the spot there. I'm sorry. So if I say, why are you wearing a white sweater today?
Because it didn't need air.
Because it didn't need iron. Right?
See?
Well, no, right, but now you kind of have to justify,
Why?
right?
Why did
Why
you
did you, right? I asked you because I want to know, tell me more about why you picked a white sweater today.
Why is it important?
Oh, damn.
Because I'm trying to make a point. If you say, tell me more, when you say, tell me more, you elicit more information. Did you feel like you could give me a better answer than why? Because when I ask why, when somebody says, if you go home tonight and you say, why didn't you make supper? Now your partner is on the defensive, right? Right?
Give it, right?
Huh?
That's when you back up and don't give it at all because you're defensive. Like,
Right.
yeah.
What were you going to say? Now everybody's turned to supper and they're like, darn, housemates won't make stew. So my husband is, some of you may have heard me give this example. I don't remember when I was here, but my husband is on to this. And a few weeks ago, we were outside, we were raking leaves, and he comes at me with like one of the big contractor bags. And I'm like, why are you using that bag? Use the leaf bags. They're for compost and recycling. And he looks at me, just like dead stop in our yard, and he goes, aren't you supposed to say, tell me more about why I picked the And I was like, darn you. So anyway, thinking about if you have to get questions, ask like, tell me more about, right? And the very last thing that I would encourage you to think about is this. Always realize how you can be a support. Don't make this assumption that, okay, you're going to report it, then it's done, it goes to the board, okay, over and done. Tell somebody, I'm here, I'm in your corner. If I can help you, let me know. Don't make promises you can't keep. Like, don't say, like, I'll go to court with you if you decide you want to tell the police, because you may or may not be able to do that. Don't make those promises you can't keep, but just saying to somebody, like, I'm here, I'm in your corner if you need to talk. I'm here. Other people from Douglas Education Center is here. Say Blackburn Center is here. Because we really are that 24/7 resource in somebody's corner. So grow people's circle of support. Honor their privacy, honor their safety. Ensure they understand that this is not their fault. Be very empowering. Give them back power. Don't ask questions that are going to make them feel blamed. And be a support. That's all you need to do as a first responder. I know it sounds like a lot of stuff, but you really don't. In fact, you can even use your hand. There's 5 tips. You have 5 fingers. Privacy, safety, not your fault, empower, support. I know it seems kind of cheesy, but sometimes it can cue you. So I wanted to let you guys, can I tell you guys a little bit about how victims react and sort of the neurobiology of trauma? I know you're like, well, yes. We don't have a better word for it. But one of the things that matters if you're talking to somebody and they're telling you their story, I hope nobody in the room has ever been in a bad car accident, but if you have, one thing that might, one way you might be able to look at this is if you've been in a car accident, sometimes it's hard to remember exactly what happened from like the first thing all the way to the very end. And that's because it's a traumatic event. So 2 or 3 years ago, I had a deer ran into my car. I like to put it that way instead of me hitting the deer. But I don't remember every single thing that happened. Like I remember seeing the deer, and I remember the car being along the side of the road, but I don't really have all the gaps, right? Because something traumatic happened, something kind of beyond my control occurred. For victims of sexual assault, it's that times a million. And it's because our brains keep us safe. That's the function, the core function of your brain is to keep you safe. So victims don't typically remember things chronologically. This often trips up law enforcement. Not chronological, sensory memory. So somebody might be telling you what happened because they're trying to get it out, and they may be telling you about a blue blanket and that they could smell Burger King. And you may be sitting there thinking, what we think because we're socially charged animals. Liar, liar, pants on fire, you just can't come up with anything to tell me. No, it is even further proof of their truth-telling. When you go through a trauma, your brain remembers sensory things first. Very frequently, victims, takes about 2 weeks to start to even get a lot of memory back. Things feel very, very, very fragmented. It's also important to remember that people are going to remember more information as time goes by when someone's gone through something traumatic. So they may say to you, like, they may come back a week later and say, I remembered this. Should I tell somebody? And that's up to them whether or not they're going to share that information, but realize that that's just kind of a normal part of how trauma evolves in the brain. So don't ever, ever, ever judge how a person by how they're recalling the event, because you wouldn't know how you would remember. Also, when we talk fight or flight, you guys know, like, what's the question we always ask sexual assault victims? What do we always ask? What are they always asked? Did you what? Did you fight back? And most victims say no, because, like, why would somebody fight back? What could happen? They could get hurt much more, right? So sometimes what your brain does, you can't fight, you can't flee, you freeze. And it's in that freeze space where they start to kind of get that traumatic memory. So realize, it may look to you like, well, I would have run. Well, that's good for you. Congrats on your desire that you would have run, but that didn't feel safe, and our brains keep us safe. My point is there's no universal reaction. People may cry, they may laugh, they may have no affect. Never ever use that to come to somebody and say, well, I got this report, but I don't believe it. Because they're going to sense that you believe everything, because you don't know how you would react if you were in the situation, because nobody has that exact same situation. We are here at Blackburn Center all the time. If you get a disclosure and you need to just get it off your chest and talk through it, we're here. We provide services regardless of length of time, whether or not they're participating in the conduct board here, or they've gone to the police, or they've had anything done. If somebody comes to you and they tell you something happened when they were 4, we're here. We have licensed therapists. We are here. We want to be a resource for people. We come from a place of yes, and just about everything we do, if it's within our power, we'll do it. Does that make some sense? So we're here. If you need us, use us. You'll get resources and information from me if you gave me your email address. I will not add you to the Blackburn Center email address unless you've put a check by your name. Otherwise, I'll just send you resources one time related to this training. Michael has my contact info, so if you have questions or concerns, or there's something you want to talk about, reach out. I'm here. Use us. If there is something personal you want to talk about, I would ask that you call the hotline or call my extension at the office, because email is a part of the cloud and it's hard to keep it confidential. Like, I won't print it out and like make it into a billboard, but you guys know what I mean.